Hi everyone and welcome to Playmakers, our weekly look along with Justin Marshall at how the All Blacks are going here in Australia during both the Bledisloe Cup and the Tri Nations. So here we are and look, we really are welcoming a very special guest to the show this week, a former Governor-General of Australia, Sir Peter Cosgrove, a man of rugby. Welcome, Peter.
It's nice to be with you, yeah.
Okay, well let's start and find out about your rugby career.
Very modest. Played at school, no good. Went to Duntroon, that's the officer training place. Put on a bit of size, a bit of fitness and a lot of mongrel, and became handy but not outstanding.
Modest.
Very modest, yeah.
Okay, let's get the elephant out of the room because the All Blacks against the Pumas, you saw the game?
I did, yeah, I was surprised. And I'm sort of thankful in a way that you played them first, because I can assure you that Australia now will be right on their toes trying to work out what to do to contain the newly resurgent Pumas.
They were fantastic, Justin.
Yeah, they were, and you know, I totally agree. I thought on the night that they turned up, they played with passion, they played with heart, as they always do. But then they tend to drift away from the game at certain stages, and that's been their vice in the past, where a good team will put them away and they don't seem to recover. Last night they just were so resilient for 80 minutes. It's a bit of a sort of sobering, I guess, situation for a former All Black when, you know, history has changed forever. You know, we had a proud record against Argentina and that's now gone. So, you know, you always sort of wake up and I really feel for the players and the coaching staff this morning, because they'll be waking up reflecting on having had that enigma about them now. So I can't take away from Argentina's performance, though. It was absolutely outstanding, Peter. That, you know, that I guess the good thing from Australia's perspective is they did get a little look at what Argentina are going to be like in this Tri Nations.
One of the things I found amazing was, I think the commentators were saying, one dropped ball.
Yeah. And I think they pretty much up until the 79th minute hadn't missed a tackle either. Yeah. And one-on-one tackles against the All Blacks, with their skill set, their individuals that they've got, the X factor, it's very rare that you don't sort of concede missing a tackle.
We normally trigger off Arnie Savia. If anybody is going to shed tackles, it'll be him. Yeah. And he was pretty well contained last night.
Yeah. And isn't it funny, because back sort of, I guess, a couple of decades ago, the strength of Argentinian rugby used to be the scrum. They used to just want to get you in a zone, scrum, win penalties, push over tries. And then all of a sudden, I think they've had to revolutionise the way that they play, and they're much more balanced. Their front rowers played really well. We're shifting the ball. You know, they're a side that don't have to rely on set piece. So 32 minutes into the game, the tempo seems to come in the game now out of lineouts more so than scrums. So yeah, it is the modern way the game's going, and the way that the laws and have been adjusted to try and keep the ball in play. It's stopping scrums. But I think the other side of it is, was the lack of errors. Usually a scrum's from a mistake, a forward pass, a knock on. Even though the All Blacks were outplayed, they also didn't make that many mistakes. So there was no real sort of instances where there was a scrum. So yeah, it was a fascinating game.
Yeah, and the other thing I really focus in on is number 6 and number 7 for Argentina, really big men. Number 7 would have shaded Sam Cane by 10 centimetres or something like that. Yeah, really big men. So look out, boys, the Wallabies, they're coming for you.
Well, the Wallabies came for us 2 weeks ago. So that brings me to the current state of Australian rugby, just kind of as an overview, and a former board member of Australia.
Yeah, and patron as Governor-General. I relish that because I was still attached to the game. Look, I think we're coming into the sunshine. I mean, we can quibble about the quantum of our broadcast deal, but we've got a deal. We've got a broadcast. It will show more rugby and it will bring rugby to more people. So let's give that a tick. The other thing is we seem to have unearthed some pretty good talent with a little bit more on the way. The lad who's just come to us out of the storm. That sort of inspirational figure will really add a zip to the game. We've just got to keep competing strongly and winning. We do that, we're really into the sunshine.
Well, what's your thoughts, Peter, on this whole debate around Super Rugby? And there's a lot of talk that's always come out in New Zealand about the viability of Australia having the amount of teams that they have.
Yep.
You know, you're a Brumbies man, I believe.
Brumbies and Waratah. So I was born in Sydney, but when I was posted in Canberra, I'd obviously go to see the Brumbies whenever I could. So I share that with those two teams, but I guess I'm a Waratah at heart.
Yeah. So do you feel that there's enough depth in Australian rugby to validate them having that amount of teams? Because we've often said, well, maybe taking a step backwards and having 3 teams, and then in the future going back out.
There's a reality which you fortunately don't have to confront in New Zealand. Our reality is geography. We have 2 teams that are far enough apart, New South Wales and the ACT. It's only 300 kilometres, but you think about that in the New Zealand geographical sense, you'd have 3 teams inside that 300 kilometres. And your whole nation is a rugby playing field neatly divided by farms. I mean, it is brilliant in terms, and it's in your DNA. We're competing with all these other sports, and that again is an outcome of geography. Settlements that grew up so far apart that you saw this wonderful game, AFL, Aussie rules, grow up and predominate. Then came the split, rugby union and rugby league, and that's a working class game which is now translated to the masses, rugby league. Boy, oh boy, we are in a competitive environment. So what we have to do is grow in each geography. We need those provinces. For the reasons of the health of our game, we have to have footprints in Western Australia, in Melbourne, a huge sporting market, ACT, and of course the traditionals, Queensland and New South Wales, have to have those. So from our point of view, it was not a nice to have 5 teams. It was essential.
Peter, I'm interested in your thoughts on having another Kiwi running the Wallabies. What are your thoughts? Robbie Deans obviously did it for a while.
I was on the board when Robbie was there. I think that the time he came in was against him because there needed to be a translation in the cultural approach at the elite level of our rugby. We were early enough in the professional era for him to see some, what I might call, player management issues that needed to be resolved. That took a while, and I think we're culturally back where we needed to be. There's no doubt Dave Rennie is a great coach, and we're looking forward to him taking the team with him on a great journey. I don't think it's beyond the bounds of possibility that we will challenge very strongly for the 2023 World Cup.
Yeah, that'll be brilliant. I think we'll come back to rugby because there's still a lot to talk about, obviously. But let's find out about your military career. How did that all start?
Well, I grew up in a military family. Grandfather had been in World War I, in the military between the wars, and then World War II, second AIF. My dad joined up as a permanent soldier before World War II. I went through the war in the second AIF and was still serving. So there I was, and my granddad lived with us. So I got to finish school and I was thinking about, I wasn't thinking about being a rugby player, that wasn't on my horizon, but I thought about being a policeman, a lawyer, a teacher, a journalist, or maybe the army. And I went to the army and I found that I was in a vocation. Went to Vietnam, all that sort of thing. So I found I was round peg in a round hole there.
And I guess you've had a lot to do with Kiwis over the years, in a military sense.
Yeah, well, in Vietnam, our artillery battery was the famous 161 battery, which had fought in Korea and other places. And so I knew Kiwis at Duntran, I knew Kiwis in Vietnam. Every step of my military career, there's been a Kiwi somewhere about, and we've always been friends.
And also one of your great mates, you were telling us earlier, is Sir Jerry Mateparae, who, of course, like you, was a Governor-General.
Yep, a bit younger than me, young Jerry. Great bloke. And I visited him officially and vice versa. With Jerry and Lady Janine, we took them to Uluru. And, of course, when I was over there with Jerry, we went around the South Island and saw some of the beautiful touristy spots there as well.
And you were telling me earlier a great story about 2:15 when you hopped across the Tasman a couple of times in one day.
Exactly. I was there for the dawn service on the 100th anniversary of the landings at Gallipoli in Wellington. I was in Wellington. And my little delegation had secretly learnt off the New Zealand national anthem, not just the English verse, but the Maori verse to start with. and we belted it out, standing up there with Jerry at the dawn service. He didn't know it was on the way, and he looked sideways at me, and we were going through A-O-R, R2R, all the whole thing, all the way through. And then at the end of that, he muttered out of the corner of his mouth, "I'll have to sing your national anthem now for the first time." And we made a practice of it since.
And he came back that day.
Yes.
And to Canberra, right?
Yes. So I was there for the dawn service, jumped in an aeroplane, flew back here, was in time for the 10 o'clock ceremony in Canberra, the national ceremony. And then Jerry flew over as soon as he'd done his bit in New Zealand, and he was there for our closing Anzac Day ceremony at the Australian War Memorial. Same deal, alongside each other, and the crowd thought it was magnificent.
Beautiful. That's a long day, mate. You would have been asleep.
Yeah, probably was actually. So that Anzac camaraderie is incredible, isn't it? Like, not only in a military sense, I think that sort of also transfers into sort of rugby as well. We often, when we're meeting with our Australian counterparts, talk about being Anzacs. It's obviously a big part of your life.
Ferocious foes, firm friends. It's got to be, always the way. The day we stop wanting to beat each other to bits on the rugby field, that'll be a very sad day. But on the other hand, there is no person more forward-leaning when Australia's either in trouble or in need than the men and women of New Zealand. So it's axiomatic. And, you know, I want to see it translate. I was off camera talking, and I'll say it here. I would love to see somebody reawaken the notion of a touring Anzac rugby team, a la the Lions. Not only would it be great football, I think both unions would make a lot of money.
Which we all need at the moment.
I think we will need it.
Don't we? Yeah.
But I just think our fans would go crazy. We could step through all the selection issues, and, you know, the best player will always have to go to the best spot, and all that sort of thing. But if we're both reasonably strong, we should be unbeatable in Europe.
Justin made a very unkind comment, by the way, just before. He said, on current form, 13 Wallabies, two All Blacks.
Stop the cameras.
Now, don't be provocative.
Exactly.
No, and of course, in any given year, there will always be one side up, one side down. But just the notion, I think, would be fabulous. And I said that I should only have three criteria. One, they must never lose. Two, they must never lose a scrum. Three, they must score tries from anywhere.
Yeah. That's good. That is good. Okay, just before you leave the military part, you do have a New Zealand decoration, I believe.
Yeah, I was awarded by New Zealand a companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit. My great chum, who was my right-hand man in East Timor, Martin Dunn, who retired as a Major General in the New Zealand Army and was a permanent head of a couple of government departments. He got one at the same time, companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit, and we received those from the Governor-General in New Zealand together in 2000. And I was very honoured. I've got it on this uniform here. I don't know. This is my new book. That's it.
Here's the new book. Is it it's for sale in New Zealand as well?
I hope so. It's going to be. And it's this fella just here. That's my decoration, the companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit. I'm very proud of that. Very proud that it says I'm an honorary Kiwi.
Good stuff. Okay, just hold that book up again, because let's talk about it. It's just come out. You shouldn't have joined. Where did the title come from?
Well, it's from an old army saying which is uttered in ironic terms by, say, a sergeant major to a group of soldiers who've just been given a rotten job and they're all looking downcast. The company sergeant major will look them in the eye and tell them, look, let's just get on and do it. And by the way, you remember the old army saying, you shouldn't have joined if you can't take a joke.
Yeah.
It just reminds people we do the tough jobs, whatever they are, and we do them with good humour.
And that's not your first book. You wrote one earlier, I believe.
Oh, yeah, it had an amazingly attractive title. It was called My Story.
Go all right?
Yeah, it went very well. Yeah. This one's a lot of me being the Governor-General and that sort of thing. So there's different stuff in it. Yeah, that's why I wrote the second one.
Okay, becoming Governor-General, how does that happen? Does suddenly the phone ring one day and the Prime Minister says, do you want to be the Governor-General? How does it work?
It works like that.
Does it?
Well, what happens is I was actually in a car with a board colleague, and we're on our way to a board meeting in Queensland. And there'd been a little bit of speculation in the media that I might be one of the people on the short list to be invited to be Governor-General. So my phone rang, and I looked at the screen, and it said Tony Abbott. Now, he'd only been Prime Minister for a couple of weeks, so I thought, this is not to ask me what the weather's like in Brisbane. So I thought I'd better answer this in a way that doesn't give the game away. So I said, yeah. And it was the Prime Minister, and he said, I would like, he went through a spiel. And, you know, every now and then when he pauses his breath, I say, yes. And eventually he said, so I would like you to consider accepting my nomination to Her Majesty the Queen that you should be our next Governor-General. Very formal words. So I said, yes, I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And I hung up the phone. And of course, my chum in the car wasn't any the wiser. But I spoke to my wife, of course, and said, what do you think? She said, oh, yeah, let's go. So I phoned Tony back the next day, and I think he was so relieved when I explained that I'd been sitting in the car with a big flapping ears alongside me. And I think he was relieved that I wasn't a total flake.
So what were the highlights of your 5 years as the GG?
Well, millions of them in one sense, because you got the remit to travel all over the place. So I went from everywhere in Australia, and lots of people coming in to Government House for functions. So in that regard, you just love mingling with ordinary Australians and hearing from them what's happening with them. The constitutional stuff is interesting. You're seeing other heads of state, and you're dealing with prime ministers and the like. I had 2 general elections, 3 prime ministers, any number of ministerial swearings in. Heads of state, like a passing parade of heads of state, over to see the Queen. I went to the 2015 World Cup, where you guys won.
Yes.
Yes. I was in the crowd. I went over there privately. I took leave, and then I just said to Australian Rugby, get us a ticket. So they did. So I'm in the VIP seats, and it's the end of the game, and the poor old Wallabies have gone down to a very good New Zealand team, Richie McCaw's All Blacks. And they're out there all celebrating. I'm feeling down. And I had noticed John Key was sitting a couple of rows behind me. And I thought, at some stage I better turn around and say, well done to your mob, John. Because he's a good bloke, John Key.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm standing and I'm just looking, and I'm still in my little cocoon of misery, and a hand claps me on the shoulder. I think, oh no, it's John Key. So I just ignore. Didn't feel it. And then clap, the hand comes on my shoulder again. I said to myself, now come on, turn around, be a good sport. So I turned around, and it wasn't John Key, it was Prince William. Oh. And Prince William said, hard luck, old chap. I said, I am better side one, And then later on, I kissed and made up with John Key.
That was a good day, Justin. We seem to remember that one.
That was a good day. Good day.
It was a quality side as well.
Was,
as you mentioned, Dan Carter.
One of those occasions when the best side did win the World Cup.
But a very, very good World Cup from Michael Checker's Wallabies. They probably went in there, probably not with great expectations, but to get through to the final and compete in the final.
Yep. But it was obvious just a bit after half time there was going to be no big comeback.
Yeah.
The All Blacks were just on fire that day. We were pretty lucky probably to get through whatever it was, the quarters or something against Scotland.
Yeah. That was reasonably controversial too, wasn't it?
Well, it was a bit of a call, but
During your time in politics, now I'm going to word this very carefully. You must have come across as Governor General some interesting characters. Did you ever bump into Donald Trump at any stage?
Yes, right at the end, very brief conversation with the President at the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, this ceremony was in Paris, and we were having lunch at the Élysée Palace, guests of the French President, after the ceremony at the Arc de Triomphe. And Vladimir Putin was there, and so was Donald Trump. And they were sitting across from each other at lunch, and they had a very animated conversation, very amiable conversation throughout the entirety of lunch. And I walked up to say hi to the President after when we stood up from lunch, basically. And we just had a very brief conversation, nothing substantive. So I've met him, but, not had anything other than a pleasant greeting. So, that's all I know of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I'm going to quote John Howard here, former Australian Prime Minister. He said about you, You walked with Kings, but you kept the common touch. Was that the way you felt?
Yeah, I certainly did, if you like, walk with Kings, because representing Australia, as your Governor-General represents New Zealand, we are very proud of our nations, and we accept that while others may have royal blood and the trappings of sovereignty, we represent two of the proudest nations on earth, and we'll take a backward step or seat to no one.
Great. Let's go back to rugby and your current involvement. Firstly, what's your current involvement in Australian rugby?
I am proudly a member of the Australian Rugby, or Rugby Australia, Rugby World Cup 2027 World Cup bid team. So we advise. I share the job with blokes like John Howard, John Eales, John Coates. If your name's not John, you're not. No, there's a lot of eminent people on there, and we are thrilled because we're going to do everything we can within Australia, and if necessary with overseas interlocutors, to spruik the benefits of an Australian World Cup in 2027. We want it to crown our return to rugby prominence. We want to crown the 2023 World Cup campaign, where we will participate, the Lions Tour in 2025, and we want to segue into having the rugby world, come to Australia and possibly New Zealand. That's still up in the air in 2027.
Yeah, I think that's probably the big question. Is there any thought process in including New Zealand, or do you think Australia is more than capable of doing it on their own?
Oh, well, we ought to start with the premise that we can do it by ourselves. But I mean, let's face it. I mean, we're rugby neighbours, very often rugby allies. So I suppose it's on the table, but that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is getting it to come south. It's been north enough.
The current relationship between New Zealand and Australia rugby looked a bit shaky there for a while, but I just get the feeling, Justin, as well, that we seem to be back on track.
I saw reported very recently that there's been amiable talks between our rugby administrative leaders here in Australia, and may that continue, because we really, as competitors on the field, that's enough. We should be commercially competitive, and therefore not, genuflecting to each other to the detriment of our businesses. But that said, we're much more powerful, and I think the benefits accrue when we see eye to eye on as many issues as possible.
Do you feel that rugby at the moment is a bit us against them? There's a big divide between the South and the North?
Yes, I can see where that could be felt, and the job is to ensure that if there are those concerns, they're conveyed, and secondly, if there are reasons that can be established, they're met. Now, an example would be the World Cup bid. We wanted to come back south. It was at one stage, it looked like South Africa were a good thing, and then it went north, maybe for economic reasons. Okay, well, 2023, we know that'll be in Paris, in France. We want to make a very good bid, not because it's our turn, but because we've got the best bid, and we want to see the world come south.
So where do you hope this review might finish, and will the recommendations be listened to, do you think?
Well, I'm sure they will be, because we'll stamp our tiny but perfectly formed feet if they're not. Look, it's in two parts. One part is already with the Exco, to be considered this November by Exco, and I think late November or early December by the Council. And then part two, you might call that low-hanging fruit that we've been dealing with. Part two, some of these other issues will be dealt with in the new year by the working group back into World Rugby for their consumption.
Fantastic.
Oh, by the way, all the constituent unions have been canvassed. So Brent Impey and New Zealand Rugby have had their say. Hamish McLennan, Australian Rugby. I've seen all those submissions, which didn't come to me. They went to World Rugby. And I can assure you there's some very powerful views being put.
Well, Peter, I think we've just about done our dash here. Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
And it will be available in New Zealand?
Yes, I will ensure. Monday.
We'll take one home with us.
That's yours to keep right now. I've given him the book. Put it on his register of interest.
Great chatting with you. Justin, good to see you again. And we'll be back, same time, same place, next week.